So if you are hearing this, it is September 12th. The embargo from Hasbro and Paramount is now done, and I could have a more spoilery review of Transformers One. I saw the movie about 2 weeks ago, and I was put under an embargo. I could not talk about it, but now is my opportunity to finally talk about it. I actually recorded this in advance. You're hearing this not long after I've seen the movie because I wanted to talk about it with as fresh I could in my mind of all this information that I've got from seeing this movie. I'm going to kind of do a bit of an overview of the story, not every beat, not every little factor, but I do want to kind of go over it because there's a lot of important things I want to address. I will not have all this information 100% correct. I've only seen the movie once. It's fresh in my mind, so that's why I wanted to record it early and then post it later on September 12th. So if certain story beats of the movie I get incorrect, it's only because I'm going off of memory right now. But I took some notes, have a pretty good idea of what I saw, and also just kind of all the little inside baseball and deep cuts and just how great this movie is and how I truly feel that the people that worked on this movie, even some of the voice actors, are truly fans of Transformers. There's a lot of love here. There's a lot of great stuff. So we'll just jump into it, shall we? So again, spoiler warning ahead. If you don't want to be spoiled for this movie, skip out on this segment. You're not hurting my feelings. Don't worry about it. You can always come back to this later after you see the movie. I mean, Hasbro was putting all kinds of weird conflicting information out there. You could see it on the 14th early. You could see it on the 20th early. You could see it on the 22nd for its debut day. So whatever day you do see it, if you want, come back here and we could have the discussion together of what you thought about the movie. And maybe you missed some deep cuts that I will mention here today. So the movie opens amazingly with Orion Pax sneaking into the Iacon archives to learn about something. Now this, even though Orion Pax in this movie is pegged as a minor character, this guy who goes into the mines, digs for energon, we do get this like little sprinkle of, the archivist, because that's always kind of how this character has been portrayed in like the Dreamwave versions and other iterations afterwards in the comic books and stuff, where it's like, oh, okay, he was a dock worker in the cartoon version. He was a archivist in the comics. Well, why don't we kind of like have a fusion of the two where he's interested in information and everything, but he still kind of does, hands-on work, in this case being a miner. And so he goes into the Icon archives and he wants to learn more about this elusive matrix of leadership. He's interested about, Cybertron, and us as viewers are then given the origin of Cybertron. And I really appreciate this because it's a huge love letter to both what Simon Furman has done over the past 40 years, along with what Aaron Archer has done over the past 20 years with the brand, where they took a fusion of Aaron's ideas with the original 13 and Primus, along with Simon Furman's concepts of, again, the Covenant and the original 13 and Primus, and fuse them together and introduce a mainstream audience to Primus, the original 13, how Cybertron was created and everything like that, right out of the bat at the beginning of the movie. And I applaud the filmmakers to do that, because that's something that could be risky. Sometimes that's some really heavy-handed, deep lore kind of stuff that you actually don't want to drop on your audience, but they drop that literally in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and I go, hey man, that's great. That's great, because we're trying to build a new audience of fans. We're trying to get out of the rut of the sinking, ticket sales of these movies that were just bombastic live action explosions and fireworks and not really telling a story. So it's nice to see the flip side of that. You know what? Let's give them lore. Let's give them story. Let's give them background into what Transformers really is. So that's awesome. So, of course, he learns about the Matrix. He learns about this. He learns about that. And then he gets interrupted by Darkwing, who's played by Isaac Singleton. And Darkwing is just going to be this headache for Orion throughout the movie. A Cybertronian elite, a big buff bodyguard kind of individual. And yeah, one thing leads to another, and we learned that Orion Pax is part of a mining group, a group of robots on Cybertron, nicknamed the Cogless, robots that can't transform and live in the mines to mine energon for the upper class of Cybertron, and that is that. And he gets caught. He gets sent back to the mines, of course, by Darkwing. And we just kind of learn the whole little world that's going on with that. And we learn that a lot of the energon that's being mined, the Cogless and all the lower class believe that it's being used to help Cybertron function, but also to power their quest to find the Matrix of Leadership that was lost to them. And we don't know why the Matrix of Leadership was lost at this point. We just know that currently right now, Sentinel Prime, the current leader of Cybertron, does not have the Matrix of Leadership, but he's on a quest to find it. And don't worry, lower class people, I am out there fighting the good fight to find it for you, fighting against the Quintessons and all of that. And yeah, and Sentinel Prime, by the way, is very much an homage to Derek Wyatt's version of the character from Transformers Animated, right down to the coloring with the deep blues and the oranges. Even the head designs kind of got a little bit of that chin going on, and just that whole arrogant, want to be the leader, want to be the one in charge, but you clearly know that there's layers to him that you can't trust. Like, it's very much that Sentinel Prime from Transformers Animated, with a little bit of the live action movie one because of the weapon that he yields, and of course the live action movie one's a lot more gruesome. So you have a little bit of that sprinkled into the Dark of the Moon Sentinel Prime, but very much a Derek Wyatt piece, and I wish Derek was still with us today to see that. We learn about the life of miners in Cybertron and how they're pretty much treated like crap, and that they just exist for one purpose, and that's just to mine energon for the elite above. And we meet Orion Pax again, and D16, his best buddy, that kind of always has his back and kind of getting him always out of trouble, because Orion is just always like, I want to, I feel there's something more for us. There's more that we could do. And D16's like, look, you just got to know your place, man. That's just how it is. And D16 really looks up to the upper class Cybertronians, including Sentinel Prime. And, and D16's like, you just got to stay in line, man. But D16 also kind of has his own little, fandom. He really worships Megatronus of the original 13. And even Orion Pax, there's this cute scene where Orion Pax gifts him a little face sticker of Megatronus, which of course we all know looks like a certain emblem that'll become a factor later in the movie. But and he puts it on his arm and stuff, like, hey, thank you for that. You always got my back, bro. And you clearly see the relationship that they have, that they're very close friends, that they care about each other, they watch each other's back, and they just have to deal with the crappy life that they have to live in as miners. And we get to see more how that job works, and we're introduced to one of the foremen of the miners, and that is a certain individual waiting for their next promotion to get out of the mines, and it's that of Alita 1. And she's also a cogless, but hopefully one day she will get a cog and be able to transform and will be, promoted to an upper class and everything. But of course, during one of the mining operations, something goes bad. Jazz, who's in the movie, by the way, there is tons of Transformers in this movie of iconic status that the trailers just did not show. And Jazz is in the movie, and Jazz gets caught in an explosion in the mines, and Orion, this is going to be a problem. Orion goes to rescue him, and, he goes to risk his own life, where D16's like, no, man, just leave him behind. And we get to see those early signs of how these two bots differ in terms of beliefs and stuff, even though they're best friends and, connected by the hip. And so, Orion saves Jazz, and because of that whole mess and that explosion, Alita obviously gets demoted, and she's not too happy about it. She blames Orion for the whole mess, and it's the classic love story of how they hate each other, but one day they will love each other. And when they get back to the barracks and stuff, Orion, pretty much sneaks out with D16, because they're like, look, man, we just got to enjoy our lives. So they sneak out of the barracks after that huge mess, because they want to go see the Iacon 5000 race. You know, this amazing race where all the transformable upper class guys go into a big race and everything. But Orion, you know, he says, hey man, don't worry. Not only are we going to go see this race, but we're going to have the best seat in the house. And, you know, obviously the cogless, they're allowed to be in the stands and stuff, and they could see the race from far away. But they're going to have the best seat in the house. They're going to be inside literally the go sign pretty much for the race. And little did D16 know is Orion actually had a little other plan, which was they were going to be in the race. And he smuggled some jetpacks from the mines, and they both use it to participate in the race because they can't transform and they don't have alt modes to keep up with the speed of all those alt mode Iacon 5000 transformers. Now, I just want to point out at this point that this scene has a zillion cameos in it, to the point that I can't wait till I get this movie on Blu-ray and go frame by frame and look at every cameo and every name drop and every bot that's there. The assumption that I have is that all the bots in this race are from upper class transformers that transform, and thus, you know, you get a lot of really like smart writing here, because when there's at one point you get a shot of the current standing of the race, and you see pretty much the bottom, like the last place guys, and then you see who's first place, and currently in first place is Mirage. I love this for many reasons. I've always said that Mirage is one of those Generation 1 Transformers that is one of the fastest in their alt mode, because Mirage was a Formula 1 from the 80s, you know, those damn turbocharged engines, insane handling that even modern European street supercars like Ferraris and Lambos can't touch. So I love that Mirage is the one that's holding first place in this race. I also love that Mirage's origin in the original fiction was that he was a hoity-toity upper-class Cybertronian before the war. And, you know, him having a transformation cog, being part of the upper class in this movie, I mean, it just keeps all of that true to the lore of Transformers that we've established over 40 years. And it's interesting because he's always been characterized as that. But when you look at the stands in this movie, all these like 84 and 85 Autobots that are cogless are in the stands outside of Mirage. So that really kind of stays true to that. Although there is a few others in the race that fall from those categories too, as well as, you know, we get shots of the standings of who's in the race. It goes up to like 150 even different Transformers. But like, man, there's like a lot of deep cuts here. You got like Blowout, the G2 GoBot. And we're going to see G2 GoBots a lot, because G2 GoBots were these Hot Wheel sized Transformers that could be used on Hot Wheel tracks. So that's like a really nice like deep cut to Transformers having a racing element to them at one point in the toys. And the fact that that was a thing back in 1995 with the toys, they kept that true in 94 and 95. They kept that true in the movie here and used that for characters. Clampdown is in the race. Again, no doubt pulling from his IDW version, where he was in the Speedia 500 in the comics, as well as also being in the Speedia 500 toy line through Walmart. Silverbolt is there. And I'm imagining that at first when I saw this, I was like, is this like a super deep cut? Because it's the race car guy from Armada that was called Blur in the Western version, but Silverbolt in the Micron Japanese version. But then you start noticing that certain characters in the standings have different icons next to their name. And the ones that are pretty much jets or flight modes have like a different icon. So it's clearly Silverbolt, the aerial bot leader. So he's in the race. You got G2 GoBots High Beam, again, another G2 GoBot. G1 Dead Ends, you got a Stunticon Porsche, and Porsches are going to keep coming up too. So they're clearly recognizing alt modes that are appropriate to this race. G1 Slingshot, another aerial bot. We got Override, aka Nitro Convoy, the race queen or king, depending on which version you're talking about, from Galaxy Force or Cybertron. Man, I popped in the theater, no joke, when I saw that name pop up on the screen. And I kind of hope that they would have been higher, you know. Override should be killing it in the race. Should be in the top 10 at least. Maybe in the later in the race, he, she, it, whatever gets higher. We got G2 Double Clutch, another Formula 1 Transformer. G2 Mean Streaker, again, the drag strip Transformer. Cliff Jumper's there, so one of our 84, 85 guys ends up as one of the elite here. Cliff Jumper is also a Porsche, so they made a note of that. You got Motormouth, another G2 GoBot. You got G2 Aqua Speeder, aka it's gonna be G2 Aqua Speeder Speed Stream. That's another Formula One guy. So like, there's clearly like they paid attention to who's in the race, what's their alt mode, in corresponding to how well they would perform in a race. There's so much going on there that like I'm missing more than I'm remembering. There's way more characters. I mean, I could swear that there was a guy that looked like Huffer that was in there. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But, you know, long story short, they almost win the race. They almost literally get first and second place, but they fall flat at the end. But even though they didn't win the race, they get the love and admiration from the crowd and all the cogless miners that saw that these two cogless miners that were in the race did fairly well and almost won it. You know, they're inspired by Orion Pax and D16's efforts. Again, keep in mind, the audience is filled with 84 and 85 Autobots. And of course, you got 86 RC that's in there for good measure. I personally would have left out RC to be used in that crew, but, you know, I always see her as a younger character that should appear later in the war along with Hot Rod and certain others. But at the same time, I think they just wanted to have an iconic female character from Transformers show up in the movie outside of Alita. So yeah, she's there. Again, great stuff. So many characters. You got Sunstreaker, you got Hound, you got Red Alert, you got Ironhide. I mean, all that was missing, man. They should have had Cup at some point. That's another like old Cybertronian that should have been there. But who knows? Save it for a sequel. That's what I always say. You know, and then obviously race is over. You have Orion and D16. They're kind of like put into a room and they're like, oh man, we're totally dead. We're going to get in trouble. This is it. You always get me in trouble. You know, Orion, I should stop, you know, always covering for you. And then Sentinel Prime shows up, and instead of getting in trouble, he's thanking them and says it was amazing. You guys did an incredible job. The Energon production in the mines is going through the roof because all the cogless are inspired by you. And so like Sentinel leaves and they feel pretty good about themselves. They're like, oh my God, like Sentinel Prime just said how great we are. And Megatron feels so great that one of his heroes said how great he is. And then Darkwing shows up and grabs them and is super pissed because he doesn't care what Sentinel Prime says and sends them to the lowest levels that you could possibly get in the work depository. And he ends up in the garbage/disposal duty, which is only left to just the lone of the lone bots. And there's one bot there that works in the disposal duty that's been working there alone for years and years and years and finally has some company in D16 and Orion Pax. Enter B127, aka Badassatron. He's so lonely that he's even made some of his own, quote, friends out of spare parts to talk to. He's that lonely. Introducing Steve, the part bot that's been put together. Just pretty much a mannequin of pieces and parts together for Badassatron, aka Bumblebee, aka B127, to talk to because he's so lonely down there. I don't know if the Steve thing is a super deep cut and the writers of the movie are so deep into the fandom that they know about Steve, the unlucky Viacon from Transformers Prime. I'm just assuming just because it's Steve and it's, you know, a very simple name and just kind of funny. But either way, Steve is made out of spare parts that Bumblebee, you know, kind of mannequin together. And one of those parts dislodges and R2-D2 style reveals a message from Alpha Trion, one of the original 13. And it's an important message of something. But while this is all happening, we learn that Sentinel Prime isn't who we all think he is. He's on the top surface of Cybertron where no one is allowed except him and his crew. And he's meeting secretly with the Quintessons to give them a huge cachet of all the Energon that has been mined for them. He does this in exchange for power and to rule over Cybertron, even though the Quintessons are not too happy with him and could probably take him out anytime they wish. We flash back to Orion and D16 and B127 Bumblebee, and they're like, hey man, like there's a message here from Alpha Trion and it has a location of where he is, and maybe we could escape our low-level troubles here and then show this to Sentinel Prime, and then we could we could get back in his good graces and everything. Well, not in his good graces, but show it to him, and maybe he could find the Matrix using this and stuff and everything. So they escape, and they figure, well, maybe if we could get to the surface, we could find Alpha Trion and everything, and it would all work out. And the only way to get to the surface is to use those mining trains that go to the surface with the Energon. So they try to hitch a ride on those mining trains. Elita 1, who's now been demoted to mining work along with all the others, spots them and sneaks on, figuring maybe if she catches them, she'll be able to turn them in and go back into the good graces of the upper class. One thing leads to another. They make it to the surface, and they end up wondering in the absolute splendor and the beauty of the early and virgin atmosphere and environment of Cybertron in its early days in the Golden Age. Its land, its mechanical life, and everything like that. That kind of evens the mood. Elita's not so much, I want to kill you and, bring you back to Sentinel Prime. And they show her that, hey, we got this message from Alpha Trion. So, if you help us out and everything and this all pans out, maybe you could get back into the good graces and get that promotion you want. So they end up finding Alpha Trion's lair after all kinds of wackiness and stuff. And inside the lair, they find the bodies of what's left of the original 13. All of them have been wiped out except for Alpha Trion being the lone survivor. They also have the body of Zeta Prime, the last leader of Cybertron and the last holder of the Matrix of Leadership before Sentinel Prime came into power. When we meet Alpha Trion, he tells us how Sentinel Prime isn't who we think he is. He's actually a betrayer of everyone, and he used his new power and forces that he got from the Quintessons to kill the original 13 and tried to get the Matrix of Leadership. He pried open his chest to get the Matrix, and when he held the Matrix in his hand, the Matrix just turned into sand and blew away into the dust because he was not worthy. So this obviously sets, Sentinel Prime, crazy, and Alpha Trion managed to get away, but he was now alone, the lone survivor of the original 13, and the leader of Cybertron is now dead and the Matrix is gone. So Alpha Trion believes that there's something special in these four, in, again, Bumblebee, aka B-127, Orion Pax, D-16, and Elita, and he bestows them with transformation cogs, and their transformation is complete. These four characters go from one design now to a different design. So now we have two sets of toys we could look forward to already from the bat, 8 figures just from those four characters. And, it dives more deeper into the cool truth we'll learn later about the transformation cogs in these characters. At this point, Sentinel Prime busts in with his crew, and Alpha Trion tries to cover for our quartet and says, hey, you guys escape, I'll cover for you. And we get that iconic transformation scene that we've seen in all the footage and trailers and stuff. Alpha Trion unfortunately dies protecting our crew. After things die down and they catch their breath, we have a D-16 that's now extremely delusioned. He looked up to the upper class Cybertronians and Sentinel Prime, and now to him it's all a lie. He's like, oh my God, Sentinel Prime's nothing more than a murderer. He's a traitor to our own race. And D-16 just wants to kill him. That's literally his words. And you could just see he's starting to go over the edge a little bit. And Orion's like, okay, chill, man. Don't worry. We'll figure this all out. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. I don't want to dive too much deeper into it. There's a huge bulk of the movie of adventuring and stuff, and there's not really too much to mention, but I mean, they do meet up with the future characters that will become the Decepticons, kind of learning about those characters. We see, D-16 more going off of the deep end and cementing his power on this group of Cybertronians that will become the Decepticons. Of course, Starscream, Soundwave, Shockwave, and the crew. Starscream played by Steve Buscemi, which we then learn how Starscream gets his whiny voice. And just a lot of crazy fights and stuff happens in that process. One of the big things is we learn that Sentinel Prime took away the transformation cogs from all Transformers at birth in their creation to make them believe that they're nothing really, and that they just exist to be these mining Transformers, or these can be these mining bots with no transformation element to mine for Energon. He was pretty much controlling the population and having just a small elite group of people control the bulk of them while they lived a great life and enjoyed the wealth of Cybertron, and the cogless were just slaving away, believing they were nothing by their own creation because they could transform and we can't. And that's that. Again, this pushes D-16 even more over the edge, learning all of this, that the cogs were taken away from them. And then we learn that Sentinel Prime actually killed Megatronus himself and took his transformation cog as his own. since he could not get the Matrix of Leadership, and he shows it. He shows his transformation cog to D16, saying like, this is Megatronus's transformation cog, the guy that you look up to. And then he sees the little sticker of Megatronus's emblem on D16, and he welds, a makeshift one on his chest to mock him even more. It just sends completely D16 over the edge. Huge battle breaks out. We get Elita 1 fighting Arachnid, who I failed to mention up to this point really in the movie, now that I think about it. Arachnid's pretty much Sentinel Prime's personal assistant and bodyguard. She has a whole bunch of cool stuff going on with her. We have this Arachnid versus Elita 1 fight, which is kind of funny because you have like the Black Widow against a character who played Black Widow. Not to mention Elita 1 in animated became Black Arachnia, and she's fighting a character that's kind of a Black Arachnia character, or an Arachnid character from Transformers Prime. There's a lot of layers going on there. It's kind of funny. Again, there's a lot of deep cuts in this movie when you think about it. But the big conclusion at the end of all this is D16 completely snaps and tries to kill Sentinel Prime and gets an opportunity to kill Sentinel Prime. And Orion gets in the way and gets shot in the process. And he fires his huge, humongous cannon D16 and fatally wounds Orion, practically blowing half of his body off. Just a mess, gruesome hanging wires and everything. And Orion falls off a cliff, but D16 catches him by his hand, and he's just hanging off the cliff. And then all of a sudden D16 just has all these regrets of helping him out. Like, I'm always helping you out. I always got your back, and I'm tired of that. I'm sick of you. You've always been like, just a problem for me. And he has a complete change of heart. And then the transformation happens. The yellow eyes of D16 turn red, and the Emperor of Destruction, Megatron, is born. And he just says, I'm through with you, and he just lets go of Orion and lets him fall to his death, all fatally wounded and everything, into the core of Cybertron. Megatron then turns around and violently kills Sentinel Prime, like just brutally, and stays true to that Simon Furman writing, that Sentinel Prime was killed by Megatron in every form of lore. So again, staying true to that. Famous first words of the War Within comic, Sentinel Prime is dead. Megatron did it. A fatally wounded Orion Pax falls to the center of Cybertron, what feels like forever, and finally reaches the core where he meets Primus. Primus has a talk with him and tells him that you're the next chosen one to bear the Matrix of Leadership, which rematerializes from the sands and goes into Orion's chest. And the final transformation begins from Orion Pax to Optimus Prime. So now both Megatron and Optimus have two new modes, because when when D16 became Megatron, he took the transformation cog out of Sentinel Prime's chest, which belonged to Megatronus, put it in his own, and now he got an extra boost. I would argue there's a part of me that feels the transformation cog of Megatronus, who does become the Fallen in some fiction, might be the thing that's corrupting these guys, like Sentinel Prime. And granted, Sentinel Prime did all this bad stuff before he got Megatronus's transformation cog, but it's funny that they have this cog in their chest, and they're both guys that just go over the edge with craziness. So who knows? But so Megatron when he puts Megatronus's transformation cog in his chest, there's that final transformation, brand new toy. That's what the Studio Series 1 is based on. And we got that final Megatron. Optimus now shows up in his new body, what the Studio Series toy is made from. And we got this big epic battle between Optimus Prime and Megatron. They beat the hell out of each other. Finally, in the end, Optimus gets the upper hand and defeats him, but lets Megatron leave. And then Megatron vows to one day come back with his forces, which he builds from these Decepticon guys. And then this leads to the founding of the Autobots. We get a big speech from Optimus Prime in the beginning of the first Cybertronian war against the Quintessons to get back their planet and start a new, golden age. The credits roll. Great stuff. And then, of course, there's an after credit. You got to wait through all the credits. And we get the founding of the Decepticons. Megatron and Kaon pretty much founds the Decepticons. We get the emblem revealed for the first time and how it's imprinted on every Decepticon. Then we get a little epilogue with Steve too and what happens with him, but that's pretty much it. And that's the movie. Leaving a lot open. A sequel, I could totally see it being the Cybertronians retaking Cybertron against the Quintessons, and then the third movie could be the beginning of the Great War between the Autobots and Decepticons before going to Earth. And it's a really good movie. It's a really, this is exactly what we've been waiting for all this time for a while. It's pretty wild that it took this long to really get a true Transformers movie for us. These are characters. The product are actually characters, as opposed to live action movies where we have human characters that make up a majority of the movie. And that's not the case, So this is fantastic. I love this movie. It's so good. It's dark. There's death. There's deep cuts for fans. There's so much going on in the background. I know that I've missed more than I remember because there was just so much going on. It's a tight movie. It's not like a 3-hour slog. There's just so much going on, and it's absolutely fantastic. That's all I'm really going to say. If you have not seen this movie and you decided to listen through my spoilers, go see it, support this movie, let Paramount and Hasbro know this is what we want. This is what we want. This is what we need. We need this to get a sequel so we could get more movies. And I will say this, I don't know how this even connects to the Michael Bay movies or anything. This is its own continuity. This is its own new beginning. This could be its own new beginning, where we could just do more of this, Cybertronian war stories, because if this is received well by the mainstream audience, if the viewership and the ticket sales are really high, this could tell Hasbro, hey, just do more of this. Do more Cybertronian war stories. We don't need to go to Earth. We don't need human characters. We could just tell these stories. We could tell the story now against the Quintessons. Then we could tell a story of the beginning of the Great War with the Cybertronians of the Autobots against the Decepticons. And then you could end that third movie, maybe going into space with the Ark and the Nemesis. But, there's so much here. There's absolutely so much. I love it. I'm giving this movie a 10 out of 10. I know that's very bold, but this is on par with the 86 movie. This does what it needed to do. It needed to be something different. It needed to be something more adult. It needed to be something dark. And it needed to be something that the characters in this movie are actually the robots and not the humans. And that's what the 86 movie was. Gave us everything we wanted to from Transformers. When you look at what G1 was, 84, 85, kids cartoon became something dark. This is kind of the same thing going on here. I love it. It's fantastic. Go see it if you haven't already. If you have seen it, go see it a second time. Put that money into the tickets. Please do. It makes it sound like I'm shilling for a multi-billion-dollar company, but the reality is we got to send a message that this is what we want to Hasbro and Paramount. And the sad thing is with big companies like that, there's only one voice that matters, and that is of money. So let me know what you think if you've seen it. Tell me what you love about it. I think it's great. And I will say one thing. There's going to be a lot of toys coming from this. If we have concept series and if we could have the Bumblebee movie with Sideswipe and Brawn and all of that, you could easily do that with all those cogless and all those characters in the background. There could be a whole bunch of fun stuff being made, not to mention when all the cogless get their cogs. Oh boy, there's a lot. There's a lot that could be done there. Let me know what you think about all this, and we'll talk again very soon here on the Transformers Slag podcast. And as always, thank you for listening to my review of a fantastic Transformer movie, Transformers One.